Welcome to this explainer for episode 2 of the Bible Explained, where we're diving into Genesis chapter 2. If you were with us for our first explainer, you know we started with this massive cosmic scale of creation, galaxies, stars, oceans, the whole shebang. But now, the camera angle is completely shifting. We're transitioning away from that macro view and zooming way in on the incredibly intimate details of one very specific place.
So, right off the bat, let's ask the big question. What exactly happened after God wrapped up creating the heavens and the earth? I mean, how do we get from orchestrating the grand physics of light and time all the way down to the daily life and relationships of humanity? It's a pretty wild pivot from the creation of everything down to the existence of one individual.
Well, Genesis chapter 2 is basically our magnifying glass. Instead of that grand, majestic overview we just saw, this text brings us right down into the dirt, literally, to examine exactly how the absolute pinnacle of creation, humanity, was uniquely formed, deeply purposed, and intentionally placed into the world.
But before we get our hands dirty, the story actually hits pause. We start with the seventh day. The text tells us that God completely finished his work of creation, and then he rested. He intentionally blessed this day, making it holy and setting it entirely apart. And look, it's not that an all-powerful being was suddenly out of breath. Rather, he was stopping to enjoy the completion of his work, actively setting a healthy rhythm for creation itself.
That number 7 is absolutely crucial to keep in mind because it sets a precedent that ripples through the entire biblical text. It represents total completion and the absolute necessity of rest. Honestly, in our modern culture of constant hustle, anxiety, and burnout, this is such a fascinating takeaway. Rest isn't just a byproduct of creation or some sign of weakness. It's literally just as integral to the design of the universe as the work itself.
Now, scholars love to point out a brilliant shift in the text right here. We move from that zoomed-out cosmic perspective in Genesis 1, which uses the majestic, distant name for God, Elohim, and suddenly Genesis 2 adopts a deeply personal narrative style. It introduces the name Yahweh Elohim. It's the exact same author, but the lens has completely changed to focus on this highly personal, relational dynamic between the Creator and his creation.
So, zooming in from the vast cosmos, we land in a specific geographic spot in the east. God plants this special, incredibly lush place called the Garden of Eden. And fun fact, the word Eden actually translates to delight or pleasure. It was a perfectly designed sanctuary, packed with stunning trees that produced amazing, life-sustaining food. It was just the ultimate haven of provision.
The text also describes a massive, single river watering this Garden of Delight, which then splits into 4 distinct riverheads: the Pishon, the Gihon, the Tigris, and the Euphrates. This powerful imagery of abundant, life-giving water flowing straight out of God's presence is a massive biblical theme. You'll actually see it echo all the way at the very end of the Bible in the book of Revelation.
Okay, the next part is absolutely crucial. God placed the man in this garden to work it and take care of it. Now, why should you care about that? Because it totally corrects a modern misconception. It shows us that work was actually established way before the fall of humanity, meaning from day one, work was designed as a dignified, valuable responsibility and a partnership with God. It was absolutely not a curse.
Zooming in even closer to the dirt, let's look at how humanity actually arrives on the scene. God acts like an intimate master potter, physically forming man right from the dust of the ground. Then, in this incredibly close, personal act, he breathes the breath of life directly into his nostrils. The man wakes up, becoming a living, conscious soul, completely animated by the divine.
Forming man from the dirt is just a beautiful illustration of our humble origins. It's a crazy paradox, right? We're made of mere dirt, yet animated by the very breath of God. This theological theme of humility echoes everywhere in Scripture. Later on, figures like Abraham recognize this exact tension, acknowledging his own lowly position as mere dust and ashes when standing before the ultimate majesty of God. Up until this exact moment, God has been calling everything in creation good or very good. But then, the narrative totally halts. God says something incredibly surprising for the very first time. It is not good for the man to be alone. Just think about that for a second. In a universe of absolute perfection, isolation is identified as the very first flaw. Deep community and relationship are an undeniable necessity for us to flourish.
Following the sequence of events, God brings all the animals to Adam to be named. This is a great exercise of Adam's authority and intellect, sure, but it also highlights a glaring absence in his life. When no suitable helper is found among the animals, no true peer or perfect counterpart for him to share life with, God takes decisive action. He initiates a deep sleep over Adam to create one.
The symbolism in what happens next is truly profound. God creates the woman Eve from Adam's rib. Scholars have pointed out for centuries that this represents profound equality. She wasn't taken from his head to rule over him, and she wasn't taken from his foot to be trampled on. She was taken directly from his side, closest to his heart, to be his completely equal partner in life.
Upon waking up and seeing her, Adam immediately recognizes Eve as his perfect match. He actually breaks out into the very first poetry recorded in the Bible, declaring her to be bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. This beautifully establishes the core biblical foundation of marriage, two individuals leaving their past to become one united flesh, perfectly complementing and supporting one another.
Genesis wraps up this section by highlighting that the two of them were naked, and they felt absolutely no shame. This isn't just about a physical lack of clothing, it's about ultimate vulnerability. Imagine how incredibly rare that is today. It represents absolute trust, zero insecurities, and a perfectly uncorrupted, transparent relationship with each other and with their Creator. They had literally nothing to hide.
But amidst all this absolute perfection, there was a ticking clock. The stage was being carefully set for a monumental choice. God gave Adam one crucial boundary regarding this lush garden, setting up a definitive test of trust, love, and obedience. Because true love requires a choice, and that choice was about to be presented in a very tangible way.
Adam and Eve faced the ultimate choice between two trees. They could eat freely from the beautiful tree of life, which represented choosing God's way and relying entirely on Him for sustenance. But they were strictly forbidden from eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. That tree represented grasping for autonomy, defining right and wrong on their own terms. And the warning was stark: eat from it and you will certainly die.
So just look at where they stand right now. They are perfectly positioned in a literal paradise. They have a dignified purpose, an equal partnership, perfect vulnerability, and completely unrestricted access to their Creator. They have everything they could possibly need to thrive forever. But a shadow is creeping into the garden, and something's about to happen that will completely alter the course of human history.
The stage is set for a massive conflict. So, I'm going to leave you with this to ponder. What happens when Adam and Eve, completely vulnerable, perfectly loved, yet entirely free, face that one single command? When the temptation arises, will they choose to trust their Creator's wisdom, or will they reach out their hands to seize absolute autonomy for themselves? Well, you're going to have to find out the answer to that monumental question in our next explainer. We'll be diving deep into Episode 3, unpacking the pivotal, tragic, and absolutely fascinating events of Genesis chapter 3. The choice they make in that garden changes literally everything about the world we live in today, and you absolutely won't want to miss it. Until then, ask yourself, where in your own life are you choosing the tree of autonomy over the tree of trust? Please make sure to like, subscribe, and keep joining us as we explore the Bible, chapter by chapter, unpacking these foundational truths. God bless you, and I'll see you next time.